Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Professor Tejinder Sharma from Department of Commerce, Kurukshetra University, Kurukshetra. Today we are going to talk on the module Managers, their types, roles and the skills from the paper Principles and Practices of Management. After studying this module, students, you will be able to know the different levels of management and their roles. You will be able to understand the roles and responsibilities of managers, and also you will be able to have an idea about the functions and skills of the management. This module will also help you to elaborate various types of managers working in the organizations. So students, in an organization, it is not possible for the owner of the organization or the top boss of the organization to do all the work himself or herself. There is a need to get the work done from others. Therefore, if I have to define in most simple terms, a manager is defined as a person who gets the things done from others. A person who is responsible for planning, directing the work from a group of individuals, monitoring their performance, taking corrective action as and when necessary for the accomplishment of the organizational goals and objectives. In other words, a manager is someone who works with and works through the people by coordinating their work activities in order to achieve the organizational goals. In the words of Ricky W. Griffin, a manager is someone whose primary activities are a part of the management process. In particular, a manager is someone who plans, organizes, leads, and controls the human, financial, physical, and the information sources. So students, in an organization, there are different types of the works which have to be done, and depending upon the hierarchical position of a manager, the nature of work differs. So if we have to understand the roles of managers and the types of works they perform, we need to classify the managers into certain categories. In most general terms, there are three types of managers who work in the organization. They are the first level or the lower level managers. These are the people who are actually working at the lowest level and are performing the routine activities. Second types of managers are the middle level managers who act as a liaison, as a link between the first level and the top level management. And then we have the top level managers. Top level managers who basically are the people who decide the destiny of the organization by devising out the vision, mission, strategies and plans for the organization. First level or the lower level managers. They are also known as the operational managers or the supervisors or even the frontline managers. The lower level managers supervise the operations of an organization. They are directly involved with non-management employees or the employees who are the workers and act at the grassroots in an organization. They are a link between the management and the non-management staff in an organization. The first level or the lower level managers are involved in implementing the day-to-day and the specific plans which are developed in consultation with the tactical managers. They play a very critical role in the organization as they make sure that the day-to-day operations of the business run smoothly. So, students, if I have to give you some examples around you of the people who are at the first level or the lower level managers, then I would give the example of a medical officer at a primary health center in a government health system. He supervises the health or the administrative staff and is also the superintendent of the office. Therefore, he acts as a link between the management and the non-management employees in the organization. So, students, let us now understand the role and functions of the middle level managers. The middle level managers are also known as the tactical managers who implement the tactical plans of an organization. Another name for them is the executives. They are responsible for translating the general goals and plans which are developed by the top management into the specific objectives and the activities. The middle level managers set the goals for specific areas of the business or the subset of the goals which help in aiming the organizational goals. The middle level manager also decides which employee in each area must be assigned the roles so as to meet the organizational goals. In the middle level, if I have to give you the example of a typical corporate house, a middle level manager would be a departmental head or a divisional head or a regional manager or a district sales manager who will be performing the role of a middle level manager. In this case, the officers will be acting as a link between the top management and the lower management. Taking the earlier example of a hospital, which we had taken in the case of lower management, a middle level manager would be the head of the department in a hospital who will act as a link between the managing director and the medical officer. For instance, there will be a HOD for, let us say, orthopedics department, one for pediatricians, one for, say, oncology. All these will be the middle level managers who will be implementing the goals which have been given to them by the top management. Top level managers. In an organization, the people at the top have to play a very important role. They are also known as the strategic managers or the corporate managers. They are responsible for making the organization-wide decisions and establishing the plans and goals that influence the entire organization. As a matter of fact, an organization becomes what the top level managers dream of that organization to become. The top level manager emphasizes on the survival, the growth, and the overall effectiveness of the organization. They decide on how to allocate the resources so as to achieve the broad goals that they set for the organization to be achieved. In order to perform their roles effectively, the top level managers are not involved in the day-to-day problems. They perform a broad role of giving the directions to the organization, making a vision, establishing the mission of the organization, and giving the direction to the organization, and subsequently the organization will work towards achieving what the top management tells them to do. So students, with these three types of managers who function in an organization, let us try to understand the role of the managers in the organization. In other words, let us try to understand with little more details what these managers do in the organizations. In an organization, irrespective of what position they are in terms of the hierarchy, the managers set the objectives for their respective domains and work towards establishing the goals of the group or the organization, and also look for ways and means to meet these goals. The managers organize the tasks because the goals can be met only when they are given to the people specifically to perform those tasks. Therefore, a manager organizes the tasks saying who will do what and when. The third important role that a manager plays in an organization is to motivate, communicate, and encourage others to accomplish their work while working with others. Managers have to see that it's a group of people who put in their resources so that the organizational goals can be achieved. Therefore, a manager assesses the performance, that is, in an organization. It is the responsibility of the manager to devise the ways in which the performance of the organization can be measured in terms of how far they have been able to achieve the goals and the objectives. Lastly, the manager has an important role in terms of developing the people, especially in a time which we call as the knowledge economy. We do not have the people who are just workers. Today is the age of knowledge workers, and getting the work done from the people who know their work is not easy. For this purpose, a manager has to invest in people and to develop the people, develop those who are the knowledge partners or the knowledge workers in an organization. After understanding the role of a manager, let us understand the characteristics of a manager's job. A management researcher, Mintzberg, had worked and shown that the daily work of managers is characterized by a large number of the activities that occur at a fast pace, and incidentally, these activities are usually happening in such a way that the results of these activities or the outcomes of these activities are not always predictables. Therefore, there is a lot of work which is happening at an unrelenting pace. Despite the appearance of boundaries to a manager's day-to-day activities, a manager's day is typically filled with an activity which can be quite challenging in terms of both physical as well as mental efforts that a manager has to make. Therefore, students, the job of a manager is not as easy as it seems. Life of a manager is not a bed of roses. There is no straight line journey for a manager. There is a lot of variety in the type of the works that a manager does. And this variety quite often leads to a lot of fragmentation of various types of activities that a manager is trying to do. And most of these activities he would be doing at the simultaneous times. There is no order. Quite incidental in this is that there are activities which are varied, fragmented, and this set of activities do not follow any pattern or any order. And quite often there are interruptions which move on day-to-day basis, and these interruptions, they can be quite typical at times. Therefore, a manager has to confront with several issues which can be current, may be happening all of a sudden, related to some specific kind of an activity or an event or an issue, or at times a manager would be confronted with some very ad hoc kinds of the issues. Therefore, there is little time for the managers for reflective planning, and usually the managers prefer to live in concrete situations. They need to demonstrate a strong action orientation if they have to achieve the goals which they have set for themselves as well as for the organization. Another important characteristic of a manager's job is that managers are between their organization and the network of the contacts. Much of the effort of a manager goes in communication. As a matter of fact, communication is said to be the most important kind of a job that a manager performs in an organization. Manager has to communicate both horizontally as well as vertically. Although a major quantum of the communication of a manager is horizontal, the manager also has to do the vertical communication, in which the reports and instructions have to be given to the top as well as the people down their hierarchy. Typically, one would expect the entire communication to be in the written form, but it usually does not happen. There is a lot of use of the verbal media, and managers have to use their words very carefully, because verbal media can achieve the tasks fast, but at the same time the words are amenable to multiple interpretations. Therefore, a manager has to judiciously use various media for achieving the goals through communication. The most scarce resource for a manager is the time. Therefore, a manager has to exercise a strong control over the schedule. Although there will be a lot of pressures which will be pushing and pulling the managers, they really need to develop the capacity so as to control their schedules, and also not only control but also prioritize them so that they act upon what they feel is most important. So, students, by now you must have appreciated that a manager plays a multitude of role in an organization. It's not only a routine activity or a monotonous activity or a day-to-day activity. As a matter of fact, as the situation changes, the role of managers also changes. And there are many ways to look at the classification of the roles that a manager plays. Henry Mintzberg has identified certain managerial roles. He looks upon information as a most vital source, and depending upon how the information is being handled by the managers, the roles have been devised and defined by Mintzberg. One of the most important tasks of the managers is that they have to provide the information. So, when they have to provide the information, the broad category of roles which the manager is supposed to perform has been called as the interpersonal roles. After the information has been provided to different quarters, be it inside or outside the organization, the next step is that the manager has to process the information. So, while processing the information, a manager performs certain informational roles. So, after the information is processed, then the manager has to act upon that information, has to take certain decisions. So, the third role, as classified by Henry Mintzberg, is the decisional role. So, this activity of providing, processing, and using the information is completed, the loop is completed with the help of the proper feedback systems, which are vital to play each of the roles, that is the interpersonal role, the informational role, and the decisional role. Further, Henry Mintzberg has explained each of these roles in little more detail. While performing the interpersonal role, that is, while providing the information, a manager acts as a figurehead of the organization. As a figurehead of the organization, he represents the organization inside the organization as well as outside the organization. People will relate the organization with the individual. So, that is the important role which every manager or every leader plays when he is having a position in the organization. The second set of the interpersonal role is the leadership role. A manager has to lead a group of people, has to work with a group of people, and in order to get the things done, he has to issue the instructions, he has to motivate them, he has to see that the people whom he is actually managing are the ones who work under his guidance. So, in addition to being a figurehead, the manager also becomes a leader. After this, the manager coordinates with many groups of people within the organization as well as outside the organization. Therefore, the third type of a role which a manager plays is the role of a liaison officer. So, while providing information, he plays the interpersonal role as a figurehead, as a leader, and as a liaison. While processing the information, that is, while playing an informational role, the manager has to perform certain more roles as defined by Mintzberg. A manager has to monitor, so he plays the role as a monitor. He has to keep a close track on the flow of information and the activities that are being represented as a result of that information. He also acts as a disseminator of information because he is the one who is actually taking the information and then finally passing it on to the other people for further necessary action. The third informational role is the role of a spokesperson. When the CEO of a firm talks about the products, he is actually representing the organization and his words are the words of an organization. Therefore, he acts as a PRO, he acts as a spokesperson of the organization, and hence he represents the organization in the general public. The third important role which Mintzberg has defined is the role of a decision making person. So, it's a decisional role. While taking a decision, the leader or the manager plays the role of an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur is not the one who invests the money. Entrepreneurial role basically is about doing new things, is about taking risks, is about allocating the resources and achieving the objectives. And all these roles which a manager plays makes him an entrepreneur within his own domain. Now, while taking decisions, a manager faces a lot of uncertainties, lot of pressure groups. They come and they try to assert their pressures. And organizations do not just go on a smooth road. There are disturbances while working. So the manager also plays the role of a disturbance handler. So the eighth role which Mintzberg has defined is the role of a disturbance handler. In addition to this, the manager has to take a decision between allocating the resources so as to achieve the organizational objectives. No organization has access to infinite resources. Therefore, the success of an organization depends upon how judiciously the resources have been allocated to achieve the output. Therefore, the next role which a manager plays is the role of a resource allocator. While dealing with diverse groups of people, and when there are pressures from each of those groups, sometimes who may have different interests, the manager has to negotiate a transaction which is acceptable to both. Therefore, the manager also plays the role of a negotiator. So, the manager's roles entail newer situations, and the same person, depending upon what situation emerges, what contingency emerges, plays a different role in an organization. Let us try to understand each of these roles in little more details. While playing the interpersonal role, a manager is responsible for managing the relationships within and outside the organization. As a figurehead, a manager performs the symbolic, legal, or the social duties. All social inspiration, legal and ceremonial obligations of the organizations, they are performed by the managers. In this light, a manager is seen as a symbol of status and authority. For example, a president greets the touring dignitaries. A sales manager takes important customers for lunch. These are small gestures of the role as a figurehead. The manager also performs the role of a leader. As a leader, he builds the relationships with the employees and communicates with, motivates them, and coaches them. This role is the role as a leader directly in an organization. For example, when the president of an organization greets the dignitaries who come to the organization, he is actually representing himself as a leader of the organization. The liaison role. As a liaison officer, or while performing the role of liaison, the manager maintains a network of contacts outside the work unit so as to obtain the information. It describes the information and then finally communicates the obligations of a manager. There is a role which he has to perform as a liaison even within the organization so that there can be better understanding of different departments. The next set of role that a manager has to perform is the information role. The information role includes those roles in which a manager must generate and share the knowledge to successfully achieve the organizational goals. While performing the informational role, a manager acts as a monitor and seeks the internal and external information about the issues that can affect the organizations. There can be duties which include assessing internal operations, which underlie a department's success and also identify and act upon various problems and opportunities which may arise from time to time. All information gained in this role needs to be stored, maintained, and managed. For example, a manager perpetually scans his environment for information and finally uses it for achieving the organizational goals. The manager not only seeks the information but also acts as a disseminator in which he communicates potentially useful information to his colleagues and his team. A manager also acts as a spokesperson as he represents and speaks for the organization. In this role, he is responsible for transmitting of the information about his organizations and also about the goals to the people outside the organization. The manager also plays the role of a decision maker, which is known as the decisional role. Decisional role revolves around making the choices, and manager's interpersonal role and informational role ultimately lead to the decisional roles. Within the decisional roles, the manager acts as an entrepreneur because he acts as an initiator, as a designer, as an encourager of the change and innovation happening within the organization. The roles encourage the manager to create improvement projects and work to delegate, empower, and supervise the teams in the development process. As a decisional role, the manager has to act as a disturbance handler in which he has to respond to various high pressure disturbances. For example, a manager needs to resolve the conflict among the subordinates or between the manager's departments and other departments. The manager also acts as a resource allocator. As a resource allocator, distributes resources of all types, including time, funding, equipment, and the human resources. It describes the responsibility of allocating and overseeing the financial, material, and the personal resources. The manager also acts as a negotiator because it involves both formal as well as informal negotiations, wherein the manager has to bargain so as to achieve the outcomes of the unit which he is heading. These 10 roles, which have been defined by Mintzberg, are not easily separable. We can't pull out one role from the framework of another role, leaving the two intact. These roles overlap with each other. However, the description of managerial work should be very importantly told to the manager. In the words of Gluck, a manager's effectiveness is significantly influenced by their insights into their own work. Reconciling managerial's role and functions. So students, it's not that the manager's roles and functions, they happen differently. There is a perfect reconciliation between the two. In planning, a manager performs the informational and the decisional roles as he collects various relevant information on the basis of which he makes the decisions. In organizing, he performs the decision roles by allocating the duties and resources to the organizational units and makes way for coordination amongst these units. In directing, the manager performs the interpersonal and the informational roles by interacting with his subordinates, leading, motivating, and communicating them. In controlling, he also shares the informational roles. So students, let us sum up what we have learned in this module. In this module, we learned that a manager is the one who gets the work done from others, and in order to get the work done from others, the manager performs various roles, and for this purpose he also needs various types of the skills. There are different levels of management. There is a top management which works under uncertainty and has to take these strategic decisions. Then there is a middle management which acts as a link between the top management and the lower management. And at the lowest level, we have the lower management who is actually working on day-to-day basis and is given very specific targets to work upon by the top management to achieve the organizational goals. Depending upon what hierarchy a manager is working on, there is a different set of skills that is required. At the top level, you need more of the conceptual skills, while at the lowest level, you need more of the technical skills. There are different roles which a manager has to play depending upon the situation. We have also learned that Henry Mintzberg has divided a manager's role into three broad categories, that is the interpersonal role, the informational role, and the decisional role. Depending upon the issue of providing the information, processing the information, and acting upon the information, the roles are classified as interpersonal, informational, and the decisional roles. And for each of these categories of the roles, there are further subcategories of different roles which the manager plays.